Okay, so hey guys, and welcome back to another Axel 72 video, and in today's video I'm going to be giving my prediction for the Mario Barrios versus Manny Pacquiao fight. And so if you are new around here and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so, like the video if you do indeed like the video, and feel free to join the Patreon as well. It really supports the channel when you can request any kind of combat sporting related video of your choice. If there's any that I miss out that you would like to see, again, like I say, it really supports the channel, and I appreciate any of the members so far. And so let's get straight into this video though. So like I say, Mario Barrios is facing Manny Pacquiao, and I suppose before we go into actually speak about the fights, just to quickly touch upon, this is a real big weekend of boxing. We've got Usyk Dubois, we've got Rodriguez Cafu, and combat sport and kind of the scene in general is a big weekend. We've also got Poirier versus Holloway 3 all on the same night, and so inevitably, that begs the question, at least from my perspective of looking at it, as to see of just how well each event will sell. I mean, the way you look at it, I mean, Usyk Dubois perhaps might sell well, but it might not, just due to the fact of, it's in Wembley. Maybe it might not sell out Wembley, and at the same time, it probably won't sell at Wembley, and Usyk's already beaten Dubois, so will that sell that well? Rodriguez has a fight already ranged against Martinez, so are people really that bothered about him against Cafu? And of course, Poirier Holloway, it's the trilogy. So will the Mario Barrios fight versus Manny Pacquiao be the most exciting fight of the weekend? We will have to wait and see, but it is for the WBC World Welterweight title, and that's causing heaps of controversy. The fact that it has been allowed to be a world title fight in Manny Pacquiao's return to professional boxing, and that's exactly what it is return to professional boxing after 4 years of being out of the ring professionally. He last lost against Ugas via unanimous decision, and of course Barrios went on to beat Ugas, I believe, via unanimous decision as well. So that's an opponent in which they both have in common. Not to suggest that Pacquiao and Barrios are at the were at the same skill level when Pacquiao was in his prime days, but maybe at this point in their both respective careers they could be arguably making this into an all right kind of fight. I mean, for the most part, you see a 46-year-old fighter who has had a few exhibitions, is a former great fighter, but is realistically a shadow of himself, and then he comes in to fight any kind of world champion. For the most part, you're gonna have the world champion to win very convincingly, but I mean, I'm not delusional, I don't think, but I do see perhaps a slight route to victory for Pacquiao, in which maybe he could cause an upset. And would it be an upset? I guess, but eh, Barrios, I just don't rate Barrios, is the way I'm trying to put it. I don't rate Barrios that highly. Before we break into the bit more of the fight, just to go through what Pacquiao has achieved and what he's trying to achieve with this fight. I mean, he's just been inducted into the Boxing Hall of Fame. He was in the 2025 list, and he was with Vinny Paz, one of the standout names to be inducted. And I feel like you have to have I think you have to have a few years out of the ring to be able to do that. So I think he might be one of the only technically active fighters who are in the Hall of Fame at the moment. And of course, he's an 8 division world champion. He's going now for his 13th major world title. He's the only boxer to have won world titles across 4 decades. Of course, he's already ticked off 2020 when he beat Keith Thurman, and then had his belt until he inevitably fought Ugas. He is wanting to beat his own record of being the oldest welterweight world champion, which was, from what I believe, it was 40. It might have been, yeah, I think it was 40. He is just in general, of course, an amazing fighter of his time. He is a one-of-a-kind type fighter, arguably should be on the Mount Rushmore of boxing, and inevitably, like I say, just an amazing name of what he has achieved in his career. And that's why you can make the argument there of why he is being put into a world title fight straight away. Again, is it deserved? I'm not exactly sure. There's a lot of fans that are straight away kind of asking questions of why he's returning to professional boxing. I mean, is it a money thing? Is it a legacy thing? Is it him just getting itchy knuckles? What is the main reason as to why he's actually trying to return? is it safe for him to return at 46 years of age? I mean, he's had a few exhibitions and, he does, like I say, look a bit of a shadow of himself. He doesn't look completely out of it, but he doesn't look at his best either. And, why has he been put straight into a world title fight? That's another question. It's the WBC again, which seem to always be able to find some sort of a way to kind of annoy or confuse the boxing fans, and they've done it again by putting Pacquiao in for a world title fight instead of, perhaps a contender or something like that. And, I suppose you have to look at the same time at the welterweight division. I would say it is in a very bad state at the moment, and where, yes, we've got Brian Norman Jr. who's coming through and he's fighting Haney now. That's a good matchup. And, other than that, I mean, Rolly Romero, we have no idea what's happening with. Ryan Garcia, it seems like we don't really we're just pushing away from him at the moment. And other than that, there's really not too many names in it. With Ennis now moving up, there really isn't a great selection of fighters in the division. And, again, that's kind of resulted in Barrios being given this fight and being given this opportunity, and even being a world champion in general, where, like I said, I just don't know if he realistically deserves it. If you look at his resume, he's had losses to Davis and Thurman, and he kind of got elevated into a world title fight when he, with realistically his only noticeable win being against Ugas, and that was a Ugas that, was already kind of going on the slide a bit at that point anyway, so wasn't a great standout victory realistically. And so, I spoke to Blair Cobbs in an interview not too long ago, and he kind of touched upon the fact of this boxing generation isn't exactly amazing at the moment. There definitely has been better times in boxing where, we're seeing fights like this happen for a world title, and it's just, I don't think it is exciting, the actual pure boxing fans. Of course, we have loads of great events that's going on with His Excellency getting involved and, everything with Riyadh season, but still there is these exhibition type fights which are being made into, world title fights, which just really aren't exciting the fans. And that's what, Blair Cobbs kind of spoke about a bit, and it's giving the opportunity to a guy like Pacquiao. But like I said, I feel like it's slowing up the division, and at the same time, it's not giving the opportunities to the fighters who actually do deserve the shot at the world title. And, that's just something that I wanted to touch upon. But, going back to Pacquiao, I've talked about his exhibitions and his kind of lackluster exhibitions. He had one in 2024 in Japan on a Ryzen show against a Ryzen fighter, and then he had one in 2022, which he won via unanimous decision, which was, I believe, against some sort of YouTuber or something in Japan, or in Korea perhaps. But yeah, like I say, not really noticeable names, not really fighters that are naturally boxers, and you could stake a claim or argue that he kind of did lose that exhibition, the more recent one. There's plenty of talks that have happened among many great fighters of the past who are kind of always floating and talking about making a return. Normally, it doesn't realistically ever come to much, but this is what we've seen. This is what happens when they do sometimes come to something. I mean, in the UK, we've seen Amir Khan, Kell Brook, Carl Froch continuously talk about making some sort of a return, and that's just never happened. So again, it is always strange to see when one actually does happen. And, to speak a little bit more about Barrios, I mean, he's always kind of floated around and been a name in the division, but even as a world champion, he, like I say, really hasn't gone on to achieve much. And he, of course, also had a world belt at the super lightweight division. He was WBA regular champion, and then he fought Davis and lost that belt, and then he fought Thurman at welterweight and lost again, and inevitably, like I say, he's just never realistically been consistent, in my opinion. And Barrios, he's a big welterweight, so I definitely think that he could move up in weight and maybe have bits of success. And it's just at the same time, he might just be kind of staying in this division for money, to be completely honest, and chasing a fight with money, because even if he does go on to make a good level of money against Pacquiao, is that going to be worth the pride? If he gets the win, people are just going to say that it was a Pacquiao who was aged and shouldn't have been in the ring in the first place. And so it's just a lose-lose situation. Similarly to like when Paul fought Tyson, it was a lose-lose. And I mean, especially I feel like if Barrios actually knocks out Pacquiao, I feel like a lot of people are just going to be hating on Barrios and saying he shouldn't have knocked him out because he's a 46-year-old man. Like it just shouldn't have happened. And so, either way, I just don't feel like it's gonna be a fight that's gonna age well for Barrios. Like I say, it's just a money kind of making scheme, and Barrios could easily move up in weight and maybe have bits of success, but he maybe also realizes that he's not going to get an easy world title if he moves up in weight. And so again, maybe that's a reason for him to stay at the weight. And he's coming off a draw against Abel Ramos, and that wasn't an opponent in Ramos who was expected to cause too much problems to Barrios. And he wasn't really doing a tremendous amount that was seemingly that good, but he was just very consistent in his work. I mean, he landed a shotter which was able to hurt and knock down Barrios, and that was a surprise shot. Ramos has always had decent levels of power, but like I say, it was surprising, and Barrios just didn't really look the best, to be completely honest. And again, I think that was another reason for fans to really not get behind Barrios and to really not support him. And that's why, I mean, even in the build-up of all of this, of course Pacquiao is going to be the guy who is going to have the eyes on him in the build-up, but nobody's talking about Barrios at all, to be completely honest. And again, that is down to his previous performances. To speak about them both individually as fighters, I mean, with Pacquiao, of course, it's difficult because of what we've seen from him recently is very different, of course, to what we saw from him in his past, prime years. But in these prime years, he had the speed, the reactions, the in and out style with the non-stop movement that was really hard to pin down / time. He found his gaps really well. He planted his feet at the perfect time. His timing as well was perfect, and he was inevitably just an excellent, a really exciting fighter who wasn't smothering any of his work and always, like I say, was just having a great fight in which he was always entertaining. And no matter what, I feel like even if he went to a decision, you were kind of always glued in and locked into watching him fight. And I feel like that was, for the most part of his career, why, again, why the fans got behind him and supported him, and why he became such a fan favorite in the Philippines. And so, that was him in his prime days. From what we've seen more recently of him, he still has the will to come forwards, and he does cover space with a bit of speed. It still seems like there is a bit of hand speed there, and like I say, he has that will to come forward, which is still nice to see. He throws in bunches, and that perhaps may be the only route in which I see him having success. If Barrios is really respecting Pacquiao and not really wanting to land anything clean to actually hurt him, Pacquiao could come forwards with bunches, and Barrios does move back in a straight line often, and perhaps he could catch him with a few shots. Not saying that he's going to be able to knock him out or anything, but I mean, Barrios doesn't have the best of chins, so maybe he could. But for the most part, I feel like maybe he could land a little bit, get a little bit up on the scorecards by doing that, and maybe could go on to win a weird decision if that happened. But again, that's only a possibility. He's got a little bit of head movement still, and he does counter well, I believe. I don't think his chin is completely gone, but of course he hasn't really been hit in recent times by any well-known punches at all. Not saying that Barrios is, but I would probably say that Barrios has a better level of power than these, Japanese or Korean exhibitions that he's been having. And so, yeah, like I said, there's little bits there for him. And I suppose, negatives that are more visible at the moment, you kind of have to say the reactions aren't what they used to be at all. And he still tries to fight with the bouncy type of style, and it's just not quite the same. And he does look physically weak quite often. He doesn't realistically get off the ropes as well as what he used to, and he can get imposed on physically, and like I say, struggle. Then he comes in with his hands low often, and it's very reckless when he's doing that. He used to be able to do that really well, and of course there was times in which he got hurt and damaged. I mean, everybody won't forget the Marquez incident where he got absolutely knocked out cold, but for the most part he was able to come in with his hands low and still be able to have success. Or he could come in with his hands high and have success as well. But when he's coming in with his hands low at the moment, it's just not having the same effect. It's showcasing the actual defensive vulnerabilities that are dangerous of having your hands low. It looks like it takes a lot more out of him when he's fighting. Again, I think he looks like he's getting more tired, and I don't know how you would be able to deal with going 12 rounds, to be completely honest. He's definitely much more predictable at the moment, and I don't think he handles straight shots the best. I don't think he lands that clean anymore. He definitely lunges in. His balance isn't what it used to be. He does waste quite a few shots, and for the most part, he doesn't gain respect through his power or his ability realistically anymore like he used to be able to. Barrios as a fighter, he's got a sharp, strong jab, and he does work well off his lead hand, where he's able to switch up the shots off the lead hand. I think them two things in general, them two attributes, are going to be the things in which perhaps he could really make into dictating this fight. He finds the mark with straights and has power in them shots, and I feel like that could definitely land. He is relatively accurate and doubles up his shots quite nicely. He is able to punch down well, and as a bigger welterweight, he has to be able to handle that and deal with that. And with Pacquiao most likely being smaller than Barrios, he's going to have to handle that as well. He's got good overhands when he throws, which take up quite a lot of space in the ring, and he keeps his shape relatively well as well, which is nice, and it means that he isn't as big of a target. Negatives about him, I think he definitely headhunts, and I think he has limited variation in his strikes. He maybe taking the older man lightly, which is again something I wouldn't recommend. He can be caught from a crouched jab and a kind of upwards jab, and that might be what Pacquiao would be throwing. He doesn't necessarily make the right adjustments, and his head can be on the line when he's throwing shots. He can, take to give, which can become predictable because he's taking too much, and just because they don't look like they're actually having much of an effect on you, you have to actually try and throw back to respond, because otherwise you're just taking shots on the gloves, which yes aren't taking any damage on you, but again you're not responding back with anything that's actually thrown with real intent. So it's difficult to look good fighting like that. He's not that fluid, and he doesn't create angles. He wants to fight at a slow tempo, which would definitely more so benefit Pacquiao. He's of course been hurt, and I don't feel like he gets you off that well if you are trying to go for the finish against him, but I wouldn't really worry again too much about that, in my opinion, against Manny Pacquiao. Who do I think is going to win? I mean, I'd love for Pacquiao to win. He is one of my favourite fighters ever, and I feel like he has got that amazing legacy in which we've touched upon, but I can't go with Manny Pacquiao at the moment. I would have to go with Mario Barrios, and I would say he'd win via TKO in round 6. If by some crazy kind of turn of events Pacquiao's able to win, then I feel like the state of boxing at the moment is just in a real mess, and that's been highlighted by if Pacquiao wins this fight. But of course, we'll have to wait and see. Again, I think Barrios, is going to be able to win via stoppage, which might be a sad thing to watch as boxing fans. But I just don't think he's going to be able to go past the 5th round and still look energized at all, to be completely honest. Then who Barrios can actually go on to fight next. Hopefully he goes on to actually try and box properly in the welterweight division if he is going to stick around there. Maybe go for his mandatory, who's Sissoko, who's been his mandatory for a while, who, I don't rate a tremendous amount, but still sat in mandatory. Or Conor Benn, when Conor Benn finishes fighting Eubank Jr., even if he loses, perhaps that could happen. Or the winner of Haney versus Norman Jr. I feel like that could make for an excellent fight if His Excellency gets involved and orders that. But yeah, now to move on to the co-main event, which is Sebastian Fundora versus Tszyu, the rematch for the WBC World Super Welterweight title. This rematch is one which definitely could have happened sooner, in my opinion. I mean, of course, Tszyu took the fight against Murtazaliev instead, and that's when everything kind of went downhill, to be completely honest, for Tszyu. He got stopped badly against Murtazaliev, and inevitably, like I say, that was not a good look for him. But then, since then, he came back and he had a win against Joey Spencer, and he looked decent, and he looked like he was able to fight his fight and looked good and was able to get a stoppage, and inevitably, like I say, that was a return fight, and definitely a fight in which I felt like he needed in his career, especially just for the confidence in general after the the big loss against Murtazaliev, which was definitely a shock. And it's been a good amount of time, I suppose, to an extent, to see if he still would, would the cut open up, would would anything, any problems be there from the damage that he took in the Fundora fight? And he's gone and had these tough fights. And yes, they haven't all gone his way like the Mertesalia one, but he didn't seem to have the kind of same level of damage, and the cut didn't seem to be a problem for the most part. And so perhaps the cut has finally kind of fully healed, and maybe that makes it the perfect time now for Tszyu to come and fight Fundora. Is it smart for him to jump straight back into a world title? I'm not entirely sure, but like I say, I feel like the world title fight was always there. I mean, inevitably in the first place, Tszyu didn't really want Fundora as an opponent. He saw Fundora as quite easy picking, seeing him in the lower, parts of the ranking after Fundora had been just brutally knocked out against Brian Mendoza. And he was there trying to fight Keith Thurman originally, and of course that didn't happen. And so it's interesting to see that now Fundora is in the driving seat and he's the favourite and everything like that. It's just a complete, everything's been flipped upside down realistically. And, for Fundora, he's only realistically wanting to take the big matchups. He's now vacated his WBO title to have to not deal with the mandatory of Xander Zayas. So he's now gone straight for this Tszyu, and he's throwing all his eggs in one basket. And I mean, like I say, I feel like he's only realistically wanting to take the big matchups. It was rumoured of him fighting Crawford and Spence at one point, and that of course all didn't happen. So he had a bit of an easy defence against Booker, which, like I say, was definitely an easy defense, but like I say, that was a defense which he looked good and performed well in, to be completely honest. Other than that, it was definitely an easy defense in my opinion. And now he's coming into this fight trying to spark up a bit of a rivalry between the two of them. He was basically saying that Tszyu could see fine in the first fight, even with the cut, which was a brutal cut. And then Tszyu has kind of responded by calling him a bullshitter. And so, again, there's a little bit more of a rivalry there, maybe a bit more spite for Tszyu coming into this fight. And I mean, Tszyu did, in my opinion, win the early rounds before getting cut. So you would kind of have to make the argument there of Tszyu having to deal with the cut and having problems with the cut, and that's, he maybe couldn't see from the cut, and maybe that was why he was having these problems. But at the same time, Fundora only realistically started to utilise his jab after Tszyu was cut. He utilised it well against Booker in their fight and did it pretty much from the very start of the fight, but he didn't really do it too much so against Tszyu. So, maybe you can argue there that Fundora was just not using the jab. Again, there's two different arguments there and two different sides of it. Who do I think is going to win this fight, though? I feel like Sebastian Fundora is going to be able to win again via TKO in round 9. I think he is going to be able to stop Tszyu. If he starts on his jab, he can really have a lot of success, and I think that uppercut can really catch Tszyu. They're both got awkward styles. They both move weirdly. I mean, Fundora, of course, the frame in which he has, he's always going to be moving a bit weirdly, and when he gets caught with shots, it does seem to have a bit of a bigger effect than what it does. But he also has that really underrated power, which is really good at chopping you down and everything like that, and it really takes a lot out of you because you just can't seemingly fight a game plan against Fundora because you just don't really know how to be able to deal with a fighter that tall, that big. And it is a bit of an unfair advantage to an extent, but still, again, like I say, I feel like he's going to be too much for Tszyu, who has showcased that he can take a shot, but he definitely can be hurt at the same time, and I think he is going to get hurt later on. Perhaps with another cut, but we will have to wait and see the way that Tszyu comes in and the way that he's having to kind of punch upwards and get up to Fundora's size to an extent when he's throwing. It might cause another cut, but for the most part, like I say, Fundora via TKO in round 9. Then who he can go on to fight next? I mean, Zayas and Garcia has been ordered for the WBO belt. It seems like we are having to wait for Crawford to fight Canelo before that fight is actually going to go ahead properly. I'm not entirely sure. Otherwise, Mertazaliev, IBF champion, that could happen. Or Ortiz Jr., he's the WBC interim. I feel like that would be a good fight. So that would probably be the one that would be my go-to to happen. Of course, the interim champion fighting the full champion, that does make sense. Going on now to the final fight in which I'm going to be speaking about on this card. It is Isaac Cruz versus Angel Fierro, the rematch. And, Isaac Cruz showcased a bit of something different against Fierro. At the same time, maybe you could argue that he does seem to be a little bit on the decline, to be completely honest. I mean, that's maybe me reading into it a little bit too much. Is his style perhaps been found out? I'm not entirely sure. Maybe he's just trying to showcase something a bit different. I mean, he showcased the jab in that first fight versus Fierro, which was, like I say, something a bit different. And he was trying to set up his shots maybe a bit better than what we have seen before. But I feel like he does still fight better with his explosive style. I think coming up into the super lightweight division, he hasn't looked tremendously quick anymore, and he doesn't look like he's had the same kind of pop in his shots anymore. He seemed, especially in that first fight versus Fierro, into the later rounds, he seemed quite clumsy, not as explosive, and weaker. And when he was made to go on the back foot, it looked like he was having problems then, and he became a bit predictable at times. He did land well, and it seemed like he had success with his power at times. And like I said, the jab was there, and arguably the best jab he's ever been thrown throughout, the entirety of his career, especially since he's been fighting at a high level. But, Fierro showcased a good chin. He boxed well and continuously did have his hands down, but he came good into the second part of the fight and was just continuously throwing, and I feel like definitely did warrant a rematch for this fight. I feel like it was a true all-Mexican fight where, it was kind of as you expected. There was just a lot of punches thrown, a firefight. Maybe one fighter in Cruz got a bit more tired than fans were expecting, but still, like I say, for the most part, it was a firefight, and it was interesting to see how there was that complete kind of shift in dominance. You could see it from the judges' scorecards and the way that the commentators were also judging it as well. They were having Cruz up throughout the majority of the early rounds, and then all of a sudden it kind of flipped to Fierro just having loads of success. And inevitably, it wasn't quite enough for Fierro to be able to get the victory. People, of course, see it in other ways, and that's why there is the rematch here. But it was a very good matchup, and I feel like it's going to be a good matchup here. Do I believe Isaac Cruz can ever really get back to a high world level again and be able to have success? I feel like he can get to that level, but could he have success? I'm not entirely sure. It will be interesting as well to see if this WBC Aztec Warrior belt will be on the line again, just as a random thing. I mean, I don't know why that was on the line. WBC love to just make these random belts, but will that be on the line again for this rematch? You'll have to wait and see. Who do I think is going to win, though? I think Isaac Cruz is going to be able to win again via unanimous decision. I think it is going to be a bit more convincing. I think he doesn't realistically have to be utilising a jab. If he's going to be trying to jab against a Mexican, it's a tricky kind of thing to be able to deal with. I think if he did stand toe-to-toe, it would be a war and he'd take damage, but I feel like he probably would be able to have more success against a Fierro, whereas if he came out and tried to jab and fight against some other type of fighters, he might be able to have a bit more success. But like I say, it's something that he's testing at least, and it's showcasing that he's wanting to improve his style after the defeat against Valenzuela especially. Who could be next for him? I mean, from the time of recording, this is being recorded before Puello and Matias has fought for that WBC title, so the winner of that could go on to fight Isaac Cruz. That could be definitely a good fight. I would love to see Matias versus Cruz especially. Martin, that could still be a good fight as well. He's still highly ranked and caused a lot of problems to Puello, and of course Teofimo Lopez, who is another name in which Isaac Cruz could fight. Of course, WBO champion, but it seems like Teofimo is more so set on fighting in the welterweight division, but nobody ever realistically knows what's going on in Teofimo Lopez's career. But yeah, that is it for today's video. Hope you did enjoy. Like the video. If you did need like the video, subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.